Hi, you've noticed I talk a lot about using mentor texts, about finding an example of the genre that you're trying to write, and then learning how to write a genre that's new by using an existing example as a guide. Why do that? Well, it isn't because I want you to learn how to write poems or personal essays or blogs. It's because this is a strategy that you can use when you leave the university. You will be learning many new genres when you leave the university, and each one has a set of expectations. Your employers may expect you to know these genres already, and even if they don't, they're going to expect you to learn them really quickly because obviously they're paying you. And if you can write in a way that meets their expectations, it's going to help you build ethos, which is they begin to trust you that you are knowledgeable in your field. So, what are we looking at when we analyze structure? Because it isn't just let's summarize what the author is talking about, it's let's construct an essay on our own topic that reflects the conventions, the expectations of that genre. And so, what are we looking for? We're looking for what an author does to start an essay. We're looking at how the author establishes the topic of an essay, or where the author establishes the argument. Where does the author develop the argument, and how does the author develop the argument? How does the author establish ethos, which is that sense of we're trustworthy because we share audience values or because we seem knowledgeable, we seem reasonable? How do we establish logos in this genre? And how do we establish exigency and what kind of evidence? Remember, evidence and logos are not the same thing because logos is reasonability, logic, and evidence is the facts that support that. How long the paragraphs are, and then, like how is pathos used or if it's used at all. This is tough. I'm used to analyzing texts in order to follow them or recognize the patterns, and you're still in the process of learning that. And so, what I want to do, since you'll be writing these Your Say essays, is I want you to take a look is what are the expectations of this essay by looking at the examples. And so, what I did is I charted some Your Say essays. So let's take a look. It's going to take a moment for my annotations to pop up. I'm using Diigo, which I use to bookmark my essays or the website, and it allows me to create annotations. Still loading. There we go. Here's the prompt. Paying a close attention to the prompt is going to help you as you address these Your Say essays. So here's this prompt, and it asks really three different things. In light of President Donald Trump's Twitter, Snapchat, and Facebook accounts being suspended and Parler being shut down, where would you draw the line at what's acceptable on social media and who should draw that line? So three different things. The context, which is President Trump's Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook accounts being suspended and Parler being shut down. So context, this was published, this prompt was issued in a very specific moment in time. And then where do you draw the line and who should draw the line? Three things, and those should all be in the essay. You definitely want to pay attention to the prompt. Now, for all those other things, I want to talk about titles. Now, I'm pretty sure that somebody at the newspaper creates a title. But for our purposes, I want you to create a title. What is the title doing? And I think it's important to think about that. I mean, we can see don't expect everyone to agree on standards, and that seems like a good title for an argument that addresses people won't agree. And so, sorry, I'm thinking much faster than my mouth can actually talk. That's what the title does. The title emphasizes the argument. And so if you look here at this first paragraph, the most brilliant minds disagree. And there you go. Not everyone will agree, and that's what the title says. If you go to the next one, where the line gets drawn is a big concern. And that is the point of the essay, is where do we draw the line? That's concerning. The next one, tech firms should not have so much power. That is the argument. Our government must play some kind of role. It's emphasizing the argument. So you can see that the title makes the argument in some kind of direct and sometimes clever way. Let me go back up to the first essay, which actually is sort of my favorite essay because it's long and well developed. You'll notice these essays vary in length. What they don't do is go over 500 words. And I want to ask that question is like, how does the author establish the topic? How does the author start? Where does the author establish the topic? And where does the author make the argument? And you'll see, how should social media content be controlled? Immediately, the author introduces the topic. And then the author begins to compare and contrast. Here's this topic, and it's controversial, just like abortion and hateful speech and who's the greatest athlete, because it's subjective, complex, and nuanced. And then the author just makes the argument. The most brilliant minds disagree. Immediate first paragraph, the author is establishing topic, direction of the logic, and the argument. The same thing actually is true in this next one. You'll notice here, where to draw the line on social media and who should draw it. Here's the topic. The author asks a rhetorical question. And now the author develops the direction. Is going to compare and contrast it to another topic, this Potter Stewart statement about pornography. I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it. And so the author is going to now analyze it through that lens. And eventually, fourth paragraph in, but really about the fifth sentence in, the author makes the argument. Maybe the solution to this dilemma is, in our education system, create intelligent, decent people, and they will self-regulate. This one, the author establishes the topic immediately. Regarding Trump's social media ban, raises a question: what are rules and who enforces them? Thanks for your editorial spotlighting tech censorship, which reached a crescendo recently when Apple, Google, and Amazon destroyed Parler, a social media service. And so we can see the direction that this author is going in. Super opinionated from the very beginning, which all of these are. And here's the last one. Our government must play some kind of role. From the very beginning, we have the title, we have the topic, and the argument. We champion life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but absolute freedom of speech or action can't be condoned if we're to maintain a workable society. The cautionary, the right to swing your fist stops where my nose begins, applies. Topic, direction, argument, immediately. I want to note that we're down here, and I want to move in, how does the author establish the argument? The author is using a combination of rhetorical strategies. You'll see that the author is appealing to a familiar quotation from an English poet: no man is an island. You've probably heard that. And so the author introduces this and analyzes the quote in order to create precedence. Basically, we're in this together, so we have to find a way out. And then the author uses precedents over and over again. Precedents, exemplification, and classification and division. You'll notice this classification and division. It's the author creates a binary. Free speech is one of two things. It's discretionary and dangerous. It's the difference between those. And so the author begins to create that, like that binary: discretionary, dangerous, homeowners association, governments, social media giants, social media platforms. And then eventually the author comes back down to John Donne again. And any man's death diminishes because I'm involved in mankind. Therefore, never send to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Familiarity. And so this is the author establishing the argument. Very, very logical with lots and lots of examples. How arguments are developed can be very different. And we see the authors employing a lot of different strategies. Let's go back on don't expect everyone to agree on the standards. The author is using precedent, examples, and compare and contrast. So the author is comparing Walmart to this idea of free speech and who gets to draw the line. Walmart chooses which products to sell and which to discontinue, how to price, and how to merchandise. It's an independent company, and so it's allowed to make its own decisions. The UT chooses which letters to publish and what news to publish. That's not censorship. The First Amendment does not apply to private companies. Sidewalks, these are public and there's a lot of freedom, but you can soapbox until your volume or audience size becomes a hazard. These are limits. The city determines the limits. And now the author begins to analyze, how are these things similar to the question at hand? Who gets to choose? And then eventually it comes down to the end and the author closes in a very general way. The author is reaching out to as many people as possible, but this is not going to persuade all people because somebody who, it's not going to persuade all people. Somebody's really, really angry about President Trump's Twitter account being suspended. They're unlikely to see this comparison between the newspaper, sidewalks, and Walmart as applying to this subject at hand. But somebody who says it's about time the Twitter account was suspended will probably follow this logic well. And that's where pathos and logos come in. I mean, this is a very logical argument, but some people it's going to make them angry. And some people it will make people say, oh yeah, totally. And so that pathos comes in as if the argument is appealing to your underlying assumptions, the things you already believe. You might actually agree. You'll see more logical. You'll have warm, fuzzy feelings inside as you read it, and somebody else is just going to make them mad. We can't appeal to everybody. That's where the idea of a general argument, a general audience falls over. This letter is very, very short. And so they're comparing any freedom and where we should draw the lines. Let's just have a better educated populace. They don't add a lot of evidence, but they do make this remark about the president. And so by doing that, they're going to limit their audience, but they might get people on their side if that audience disagrees with Mr. Trump. In this one, we see them once again appealing to presidents. This happened in the past. They're using exemplification, compare and contrast. And so it's really an attack on tech. And so they're developing this. Again, super short argument. At the end, they try to appeal to everybody. Tech's opaque, shifting standards, and disregard of privacy have upset both Republicans and Democrats, so there's hope for legislative action at both the federal and state levels. But their comments before about Hunter Biden are likely to turn off Democrats. And so is that appeal at the end going to work? I want to talk about types of evidence, because we see a lot of logic, a lot of reasoning happening, a lot of exemplification, but there's not a lot of what we would call evidence the way we use it in academia. I mean, obviously, John Donne, somebody had to look up the quotes if they hadn't memorized them, which I think most don't. They're referencing things in current current history or current events. And so they're referencing those things, but not necessarily a lot of evidence the way we might think of evidence in academia. And I already said that. Let me do a new share, go back to the slides. What do these have in common? Because they do have some common structures. The authors are establishing the topic and the argument early in the first paragraph, or if those paragraphs are super short, they're doing it in the third or fourth paragraph. I also want to emphasize the length of the paragraphs. They're establishing topic, argument, direction of the argument, and why the argument matters right at the beginning. They're building ethos by demonstrating knowledgeability, fairness, and general goodness. All of the authors have attempted to seem like they've looked at this, all the sides. They may have landed on one or the other, but they're trying to connect. The authors are establishing the logic of their arguments through a variety of rhetorical strategies. Lots of exemplification, lots of compare and contrast. This is like that. Lots of a cause and effect. If we do this, this is what will happen. Classification and division. We can look at this in two ways. It's this or that. Everything's going to fall within those categories. Precedence. This was done before, and so it makes sense that we would do this now. These are really logical rhetorical strategies. And we see in the conclusion, authors are re-emphasizing their argument, but they're doing it in a new way to tie together the logic and why it matters. They're relying on the logic they established. And in doing this, they appeal to their primary audiences. And I want to emphasize that these authors are, none of them are like, how do I say this? In some cases, it appears that they're trying to appeal to a general audience, but you can see that they're appealing to certain political points of view as they, that they're assuming that this primary audience might agree. And like, if you look at it and you go, no, that's wrong, then you don't share that underlying audience. But if you go, oh, that makes sense, then you might actually share those underlying assumptions. These underlying assumptions are beliefs, values you hold before you even start reading. Now, that's the basic structure. That's how I'm grading these essays. And so it's important to see what are those other texts doing, these texts that the Union Tribune says are exemplary, we're going to publish them. What are they doing? What are they, what structures do they have in common? So you can replicate those to build your own logical argument. You'll notice that they presented a lot of different points of view, and all the authors did that in all the essays we read. All right, Have fun with this. Some of you may want to write your argument this week, some of you next week, but definitely after that, you're going to do that. By the way, if you get published, let me know. I will be reading the paper and I will celebrate if you're published. That's all I got.